I typically never make videos discussing Sony's state of plays, because they're usually smaller showcases that only have one big hitter worth talking about, maybe two on a charitable day. But in the days leading up to this most recent one, rumors were swirling around about multiple games getting a reveal or an update very soon. So when the June 2022 State of Play was announced, people readily put their clown makeup on in hopes of a big showcase in spite of a fairly meager 30-minute runtime. Sony already revealed ahead of time that it would feature upcoming titles for the highly anticipated PSVR 2, as well as appearances by third-party games. And on top of all that, Sony revealed this show was going to be part of Jeff Keighley's Summer Game Fest. Against my better judgment, I couldn't help but have high hopes too, so I tuned in expecting some surprises. And god damn did I get surprises. When I talk about showcases or events, I use the word reaction in the video title because I do go over my initial thoughts, but I don't actually record myself viewing the show for the first time. But for this, I feel like I probably should have. Before we discuss the show, I should mention that I won't touch on every single game that appeared in this State of Play. I'll be focusing exclusively on games that personally interest me the most. The first thing to show up was the biggest surprise of the whole show, funnily enough. Resident Evil 4 Remake. We all knew it existed. It's been so heavily rumored for about a year now by a ton of insiders of varying credibility, we've all pretty much accepted that its reveal was imminent. But I don't think we expected it to be this imminent. I know I didn't. The first thing the trailer showed was a date, March 23rd, 2023. When this popped up, my brain did go to Resident Evil, because for the last few titles in the series, they've all released within several months of their first reveal. I wasn't totally convinced at first, but as the short title card animation continued, I became more and more certain, and then that 4 appeared on screen. The Spanish guitar was also a very strong hint, as well as the Los Iluminados insignia-shaped stake inside the title. The trailer showed a hell of a lot more than I expected it to. We got multiple shots of Ashley in her new spiffy outfit, we got glimpses of Leon talking to the president, we got shots of Leon walking into the first house of the game, we saw a bit of Luis, and heard his voice and saw his red 9. We saw Leon in a boat in the middle of the lake, we got a shot of the famous beginning village, we saw a tease of Ada, and a little bit of Mendez. We caught a glimpse of Sadler, and most importantly of all, we see Leon in his iconic jacket. Hopefully it stays on for a longer portion of the game. This remake looks incredible, both in regard to fidelity and aesthetic. It seems like it's focused on being more scary than campy, which might irk some people, but I gladly welcome the shift. A very interesting moment is Leon's lines at the end of the trailer, stating that this time it can be different. Something tells me this isn't just Leon referring to his mission, but also a message from Capcom letting us know that some things are going to change, and we can catch a hint of this in the trailer, where the four-winged symbol we see in Resident Evil Village is present, or at least a symbol that bears a resemblance. Notably absent was Salazar and El Gigante and the Merchant, but maybe we'll see them later. So yeah, I am really fucking stoked for this. March cannot come soon enough. I can't wait to have my ass blown out in fear by regenerators in ray-traced 4K. It's gonna be great. I do hope the suplex stays in though. The reveal truly ends by mentioning VR content also being developed, but that's not the only Resident Evil game getting some VR love. Immediately after, Resident Evil Village is confirmed to be getting a VR update for PSVR 2, and it looks awesome. It even shows off the dual wielding that's possible in the recent Resident Evil 4 VR on Quest 2. For some people, Village in VR might seem like a gimmick that doesn't change anything about the experience, but let me tell you right now, as someone who has played RE4 VR on Quest 2, it is an insane difference. If Village in VR feels anything close to it, it's going to be fun as hell, and it's going to be worth at least one more full replay. I'm not exaggerating or embellishing anything here. Resident Evil 4 VR is the most fun version of that game, at least to me. So having that experience in mind makes me very excited for Village's VR update. After that, we saw some more VR games, a surprising announcement of Spider-Man going to PC, and an update on Stray, the highly anticipated cat game, where you take control of a little feline friend who navigates a very dreary yet colorful cyber world. The trailer gives a lot of small glimpses as to what kind of puzzles and stealth segments the player will be dealing with, and it seems very thoughtfully designed, considering we're controlling a cat who supposedly cannot fight back. And the game has a very close release date of July 19th. I'll be keeping an eye on this one for sure. After that is a big update on a game I'm very excited for, the Callisto Protocol, the spiritual successor to Dead Space, directed by Dead Space's creator, Glenn Schofield, and developed by his new team, Striking Distance Studios. We got a lot of short teases of gameplay, monsters, and the general setting, and honestly this looks like Dead Space without being named Dead Space, but that's a great thing. That's exactly what I expected and wanted out of this game. I want crisp, impeccable sound design. I want heavy, oppressive atmosphere. I want the feeling of total isolation. Furthermore, Schofield also confirmed several days ago on Twitter that the Callisto Protocol no longer takes place in the PUBG universe and is now considered its own world. As far as I know, the link to PUBG was superficial anyway, but cutting that thread allows for this game to grow into something special, with its own identity later down the line. And on top of that, it has a December 2nd release date, meaning it's out less than 2 months away from the Dead Space remake, which is then 3 more months away from Resident Evil 4 Remake, which was the game that served as major inspiration for the original Dead Space to begin with. It's gonna be one hell of a time for horror game fans in that window. More games were shown off after that, including Eternights, a high-octane, balls-to-the-wall hand-holding simulator. Then we got another heavy hitter. Literally. Street Fighter VI gameplay was officially revealed to the world, and man, there's a lot to speak on here. Chun-Li was officially reintroduced, and another new character, Jamie, who has some sort of relationship with Yun and Yang, debuted. A ton of mechanics were shown off, all of which were explained on Capcom's website. We have the drive system, which is a constantly replenishing meter that basically dictates every special move your character can do, and it's separate from the super meter. Parries were shown off, Jamie and Ryu's ultimates were shown off, and the website explains a new modern control scheme that allows specials to be performed with simple inputs. This is fine for casual players, though it does not seem to be competitively viable, because it looks like you lose access to 3 normals because buttons are simply light, medium, and heavy, and are not divided into punches and kicks. If you have any idea what footsies, spacing, or fundamentals are, then this is a crucial detail. But classic controls are still there, and I imagine the majority of players, particularly returning players, will just stick to that. Furthermore, the trailer shows off some sort of single-player world tour mode where you take control of, presumably, a created character and actually walk around a fully realized environment and fight various opponents. This is a great thing. I've said many times in the past that casual fighting game players care the most about 2 things besides gameplay: good graphics and robust single-player content. Games by NetherRealm continue to prove this time and again, and it seems Capcom has finally taken notice. Aesthetically, Street Fighter VI looks really cool. I love everyone's new designs, I love the hip-hop motifs that remind me of Third Strike, and I love the cool effects and splashes of color when hits land. It all looks super slick. I made a video some time ago about my worries that this game might repeat the mistakes of Street Fighter V and launch in a poor state. But it seems like Capcom has learned. Guess we'll find out. But as of right now, I'm feeling pretty optimistic. Then a couple indie games were shown off, and then the show reached the ending, or a finale, so to speak. The state of play started off strong, and it was determined to end strong too. And what better way to do that than to provide a big update on one of the most anticipated third-party titles? Final Fantasy XVI. a game I've been dying to hear more of for the last 2 years. Yoshi P appeared on screen to introduce the new trailer, and anyone familiar with Final Fantasy XIV would undoubtedly have a big reaction to his mere presence, like I did. And much like Resident Evil 4's trailer, this one had a lot to digest, particularly a deeper look into gameplay, with new HUD elements now on screen. Story-wise, we get a look at a bunch of new icons: Garuda, Ramuh, Odin, and Bahamut, as well as confirmation that the blonde lady, Benedicta, we saw briefly in the announcement trailer 2 years ago, is indeed Garuda's dominant. Graphically, the game looks significantly improved. Character models look beautiful and detailed, and the lighting looks really crisp. But the real star of the trailer is the combat. First is the interface. It has a sort of glassy, polished, sci-fi aesthetic that's heavily reminiscent of Final Fantasy XIII's. I'm sure this will probably bug some people, but honestly it's kinda what 14's HUD is like too, so I'm not really bothered by it. If anything, I think it's an interesting contrast between aesthetics. We can see in what appears to be boss fights that the enemy's HP bar takes up the top right corner of the screen, opposite Clive's. We can also see that in the top left corner, behind Clive's HP bar, is portraits of icons, and the L2 button. The new trailer's accompanying PlayStation blog post essentially confirms that different icons will be equipable and you can switch between them on the fly, allowing you to use abilities associated with them in combat. There's also a perks section on the HUD that's slightly visible, and I assume those are buffs offered by equipment or items, perhaps. There's an item quick use function in the bottom left assigned to the D-pad, and special attacks in the bottom right assigned to the R2 button. The stagger mechanic from Final Fantasy VII Remake returns, and while Clive hits the enemy while they're staggered, an Odin meter starts to fill. And finally, we have icon battles, where two giant beasts duke it out, and it's pretty clear that we control one of them, as Clive probably transforms either when certain conditions are met or as story-related events. The combat looks extremely fast-paced and super flashy. I can absolutely believe that the battle director was a guy who worked on Devil May Cry 5 and Dragon's Dogma, the latter of which seems to have a stronger influence here. Either way, it looks fun as hell, and I hope it controls as smoothly as it looks. Oh, and the aforementioned blog post also contains screenshots of Clive in the open world, so this isn't going to be a linear game. There's lots of big open spaces to explore. Overall, I'm extremely happy with how it looks, and with another year of waiting, we'll probably get glances of towns and stuff later. And yes, a whole nother year off until the game is in our hands. It seems like a long time, but if Yoshi P feels the game needs it to be in tip-top shape, then I trust him. After 3 years of being a Final Fantasy XIV player, the man has not steered me wrong yet. Oh, and Masayoshi Soken is doing an astounding job with the music. I cannot wait for non-14 players to finally understand his talent. I've seen some scant complaints and worries about how the game would be ruined if Clive's the only playable character and there's no party or whatever, and I've seen people express concern because they care more about setting and story than they do actual gameplay, so the thought about combat actually being important now is somehow a bad decision. And as someone who's been a Final Fantasy fan for about 23 years now, somewhere around there, I am, quite frankly, glad that this series is purposefully breaking away from the criteria people have had for it for decades. A lot of fans of old franchises find comfort in sticking to routines, and sometimes I do too. But ultimately, I cherish adventurousness even more. But yeah, 16 looks astounding. The combat seems fun as hell, the music is epic, the story looks dark and gritty. As of right now, it is my most anticipated game of 2023. And that, my friends, concludes my thoughts on the June 2022 State of Play. It was, without a shadow of a doubt, the best State of Play Sony's ever given us. It was 30 minutes of pure fire, and it was almost entirely third-party properties too. I imagine they'll have a September show with all the first-party stuff, as they've had for the last couple years, and I look forward to that one too. Soon, Microsoft will be having their own event as well, and I hope it leaves just as much of an impression. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.